The wind off the Montana plains was a living thing that night, thin, sharp, and relentless as it carved sheets of white across Cedar Ridge Highway. Jack Dalton tightened his grip on the worn steering wheel of his old F-150, the truck rattling with every gust. At 36, Jack carried the build of a man who had spent half his life in combat zones, broad shoulders hardened by battlefield weight, forearms corded with muscle, and a face shaped by sand, fire, and cold. His jaw, square and stubbled from days without shaving, looked carved from the same granite as the mountains looming beyond the blizzard. His dark hair, grown a little longer since leaving the Navy, fell forward as he leaned into the windshield, scanning the storm. His eyes, gray and cold as forged steel, held the quiet vigilance of someone who had spent too long waiting for danger to emerge out of nothing. Beside him sat Scout, his 4-year-old sable German shepherd, posture erect even as the truck slid slightly on a patch of black ice. Scout had a broad chest, thick winter coat, and intelligent amber eyes that never stopped tracking the world. He was trained for detection, protection, and battlefield obedience, but now he served as something quieter, a companion for the parts of Jack's life he didn't speak about. The dog's ears twitched at each shift of the wind, and a low rumble vibrated in his throat. Not fear, but warning. Jack exhaled, fogging the cab. He wasn't heading anywhere urgent, just returning to his family's abandoned ranch at the edge of Cedar Ridge. The house had burned 2 winters ago while he was deployed overseas. He hadn't made it home in time, and that failure settled on him like the weight of the rifles he once carried. The cabin near the barn was the only structure still standing. He had told himself he was going there tonight to repair it. In truth, he had nowhere else to be. Then Scout growled, sharp, sudden, a different sound. A sound Jack recognized instantly from years of working with the dog. Someone is out there. He eased off the accelerator. The headlights cut through the swirling snow and swept across something that didn't belong on a deserted, frozen highway. At first it looked like debris, or maybe a fallen fence post half buried in the drifting white. But then it moved. Jack's breath tightened. A woman was staggering forward through the storm, her posture bent against the wind. She clutched an infant wrapped in a thin, worn blanket. 4 small children huddled behind her, each step unstable, their outlines trembling as if the storm itself were swallowing them. Jack hit the brakes hard. The truck fishtailed before catching traction. "Jesus," he muttered, already throwing the door open. Frozen wind punched him in the chest, slicing through his coat. The woman gathered her children instantly, stepping in front of them with a fierce, instinctive protectiveness. Up close, she was striking in a way forged by hardship, not vanity. Lena Red Cloud, though he didn't yet know her name. She was tall, slender but strong, with long black hair plastered to her copper-toned skin by melting snow. Her features were sharp and beautifully defined. High cheekbones, wide dark eyes, and a mouth pulled thin by exhaustion and fear. A faded shawl woven with Lakota geometric patterns clung to her shoulders, already stiff with frost. Her body shook from the cold, but her stance did not waver. "Stay back," she whispered, voice hoarse, tightening her grip on the baby. Jack lifted both gloved hands, palms open. "Easy. I'm not here to hurt you." The children clung to their mother. The oldest, a girl around 11, stood slightly ahead of her siblings, trembling but determined, jaw set in a quiet mimicry of adult courage. The younger girls, perhaps 8, 5, and 3, shook violently beneath clothing far too thin for a Montana blizzard. Even the baby had begun to go limp, a terrifying sign of cold overtaking the body. Jack's instincts flared. Hypothermia wasn't coming. It was already here. Snow swirled between them. Scout stood at Jack's side, posture tense but not threatening, head lowered in cautious respect. Jack kept his voice calm, steady, the same tone he used for civilians during rescue missions overseas. You and the kids won't make it another half hour out here. I have a cabin close by, heat, blankets, food. He glanced at their purple lips, their faltering breath. Come with me. No one survives alone. Lena's eyes flicked from Jack to the children. Her fear battled her desperation. The storm roared like a living creature around them. She swallowed, trembling, and finally nodded, a movement so small it could have been missed entirely. Jack moved fast, but gentle. He lifted each child into the truck's cab, where Scout immediately backed up to give them space, curling his body in a protective arc. The baby whimpered when the warm air hit his face. Lena hesitated a final second before climbing in beside them, still clutching the infant with both arms, as if the storm might snatch him away. Jack closed the door, sealing them into safety. They drove slowly toward the ranch, the world reduced to a tunnel of white. The cabin appeared as a shadow at first, then a shape, then a home. Barely standing, but standing nonetheless. Inside, Jack lit the fire, spread blankets, and watched color creep slowly back into the children's cheeks. Lena stayed close to them, never letting her guard fully lower. Jack didn't blame her. Trust wasn't something people in her position gave freely. Scout settled at the front door, body stretched long, head resting on his paws, ears angled toward the storm, a sentinel by instinct and by heart. The night passed in uneasy sleep. Children curled beneath blankets, Lena upright against the wall fighting exhaustion, Jack pacing the cabin, haunted by memories of other rescues, other nights, other people he had failed to save. 40 miles away, in the small sheriff's station of Cedar Ridge, Deputy Jenna Morales, a sharp-eyed Latina woman in her early 30s with a lean build and a no-nonsense demeanor, picked up a call about a suspicious vehicle stopped on the highway during the blizzard. Jenna had grown up in a rough neighborhood in Los Angeles before joining law enforcement, and her instincts were razor-sharp. She had seen too many emergencies begin with, "A car stopped in bad weather." She pulled up the plate number, recognized it as belonging to Jack Dalton, a former SEAL listed as inactive, medically discharged, and marked the Dalton Ranch on her map. "Noted," she murmured, clicking the database shut. A stopped truck in a storm usually meant trouble. She made a plan to check on Dalton at first light. But for tonight, the wind howled, the snow deepened, and 5 lives slept under Jack Dalton's roof for the very first time. Morning came slowly, as if even the sun hesitated to break through the ragged edge of the storm. The blizzard had softened into a quiet snowfall, blanketing Jack Dalton's cabin in a pale stillness. Inside, the fire Jack rebuilt through the night crackled with new life, pushing warmth into the corners of the small room. The heavy scent of burning pine mixed with the faint smell of wet wool. Lena Red Cloud's shawl hung near the hearth, steam drifting from it in thin ribbons. Lena sat near the children, her tall, slender frame rigid despite the improving warmth. Her long black hair, which she had combed through with stiff fingers that morning, now hung loose down her back, drying slowly. Her copper-toned skin, dulled by cold and exhaustion the night before, held a faint glow again, though her wide, dark eyes remained guarded. She moved with a quiet grace, but every gesture was clipped, cautious, as though she expected the world to take something from her if she relaxed even briefly. Her 4 daughters hovered close by, sleepy-eyed, timid, but no longer shivering. The oldest, a girl with Jack's estimate of 11 or 12, had Lena's solemn eyes and a fierce determination carved into her thin face. The younger girls, still huddled in borrowed blankets, watched Scout with growing fascination. Scout, the 4-year-old sable German shepherd, had stationed himself near the stove, a warm guardian with an intelligent tilt to his amber eyes. When one of the girls giggled softly and touched his ear, he responded with a gentle rumble, not a warning, just acknowledgement, and lay his head down again. Even Lena's rigid posture loosened at that. No one could watch a child bond with a loyal dog and not feel something thaw. Jack moved through the cabin quietly, checking the windows, adjusting the fire, assessing the shape of the day the way he had once assessed the perimeter of a foreign village. His tall frame cast long shadows across the room. His rugged face, unshaven and angular, looked softer in the morning light. But the set of his jaw, the faint tremor of tension in his hands, the scanning of doorways, those were habits he had never been able to break. "Are you hungry?" he asked gently. He kept his tone low, measured. He knew how to talk to frightened people. He'd done it in war zones more times than he cared to remember. Lena hesitated before nodding. "The children are," she murmured. Her voice was soft but steady, shaped by years of speaking carefully, choosing each word like it might have consequences. Jack cooked what he had: scrambled eggs, toast, some canned fruit, and watched the children devour everything with quiet, desperate hunger. He noticed how Lena touched each child's hair before they ate, a small, grounding gesture. He also noticed how she didn't eat until the children finished. Hours passed while the storm fully died off. The cabin warmed. A fragile calm settled into the walls, but calm, Jack knew, was only a resting place, never a guarantee. That evening, once the children drifted into deep sleep bundled under layered quilts, the silence between Jack and Lena stretched into something heavier than the storm outside. She sat by the hearth, firelight flickering across her features. Jack sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped tightly. He waited until she spoke first. "I owe you thanks," Lena said quietly, not looking at him. "But I don't owe you trust." Jack nodded. "That's fair." She finally met his gaze, her dark eyes searching his face for motives she feared he might hide. She saw only exhaustion and something else, shame he kept buried under years of discipline. She began to speak, haltingly at first, then with a momentum that surprised even her. She told him about her father, Daniel Red Cloud, a strong-backed Lakota man with hair that flowed past his shoulders like a black river, eyes warm enough to calm storms, a man who could track elk for miles and carve a bow from memory alone. 15 years ago, he walked into a blizzard to rescue a stranded traveler. He never returned. No body, no closure, only rumors of white hills swallowing him whole. The reservation mourned him, but Lena never stopped waiting. Jack listened without interrupting. He had learned long ago that some stories broke if touched too soon. She told him about Eric Red Cloud, her husband, once solid and gentle, shaped by family expectations and tribal obligations, but twisted over the years by alcohol and the obsession that he needed a son to validate his place. With each daughter's birth, the disappointment deepened. With every bottle drained, His silence curdled into rage. "He apologized at first," Lena whispered. "Then he stopped apologizing. Then he stopped pretending he cared whether we were afraid." Jack's jaw tightened. He had seen men like Eric overseas, men who let anger rot inside them until everyone around them paid the price. When Lena fell silent, the cabin felt too small to contain the weight of her memories. Jack rubbed his hands together slowly before letting out the truth he had carried for half his life. "There's something you need to know," he said, voice low. "About that storm, the one 15 years ago." Lena's gaze sharpened. Jack stood, motioning for her to follow. She hesitated, then joined him as he opened the door to the small room that had once belonged to his mother. Inside, beneath the dim lantern light, lay an old cedar chest. Jack knelt and opened it. On top was a folded blanket, deep indigo, worn but still beautiful, threaded with jagged white designs shaped like broken lightning. Lena's breath fractured in her chest. "Where did you get that?" Her voice trembled. The fire behind them cracked sharply, like a branch breaking under too much weight. Jack touched the fabric reverently. "My truck slid off the ridge road 15 years ago. Storm hit fast. I was pinned, couldn't move. A man appeared, Lakota. Strong, long hair, determined eyes. He wrapped me in this, pulled me until I was free." He swallowed hard, shame tightening every word. The ground gave way under him. Lena staggered back, clutching the doorway, her face draining of color. The cabin felt suddenly too quiet, too still, as though the world itself paused to watch the truth fall apart inside her. "My father," she whispered. Jack bowed his head in silence. The blanket lay between them, a bridge and a wound. Lena stepped outside into the snow, barefoot, baby in her arms, breath shaking. Jack followed but stopped a few feet behind, helpless. Scout whined softly, sensing the fracture neither human could mend. Snowflakes drifted around them like ashes from a forgotten fire. Lena stared into the white expanse, grief twisting her posture into something fragile and fierce at once. When she finally turned toward Jack, her eyes burned, not with hatred, but with a breaking so deep it shook him. And before Jack could speak, before he could reach for any words that might keep her from collapsing completely, a distant engine growled through the night, headlights cutting across the drifting snow toward the cabin. Someone was coming, and not slowly. The engine's growl grew louder as headlights sliced through the drifting snow, approaching Jack Dalton's cabin with an urgency that made the night feel suddenly smaller. Jack stepped forward instinctively, his tall frame tensing, shoulders squared, jaw tightening beneath his dark stubble. Scout rose beside him, hackles lifting slightly along his spine, amber eyes locked on the approaching vehicle. Behind them, inside the cabin's doorway, Lena clutched her baby close, grief still shuddering through her from the revelation about her father. But now a new fear flickered across her face, one Jack recognized immediately. This wasn't just anyone. This storm had a name. The truck slid to a stop in a spray of snow. The driver's door slammed open. Eric Red Cloud stepped out, broad-shouldered, tall, built like a man who once commanded respect, but now carried the ruin of too many nights drowned in whiskey. His long black hair was shoved back into a loose tie, strands escaping to whip around his weathered face. His jaw was rough with uneven stubble, his cheekbones sharp from stress or neglect, and his eyes, narrow, restless, bloodshot, held a simmering rage barely caged beneath the surface. A scuffed leather jacket clung to him, smelling faintly of alcohol even from yards away. He walked like a man who believed the world owed him something, and everyone around him was withholding it. "Lena!" he barked, voice cracking through the cold. "You think you can take my children and disappear?" His words were slurred around the edges, not stumbling drunk, but the kind of simmering intoxication that sharpened anger into something unpredictable. Jack shifted slightly, placing himself between Eric and the cabin. Scout mirrored the movement, lowering his head, stance ready but not aggressive. Eric's gaze snapped to Jack, lingering on the rugged lines of his face, the squared jaw, the controlled posture. "So this is it?" Eric sneered. "You run off into a storm with some soldier boy?" Before Jack could answer, another pair of headlights crested the drive, this time steady, deliberate. A county sheriff's SUV rolled in behind Eric's truck. Two figures stepped out, Sheriff Hank Sullivan and Deputy Jenna Morales. Sheriff Sullivan, a man in his early 50s with a weather-beaten face, a thick mustache touched with gray, and a sturdy build softened slightly by years behind a desk, moved with quiet authority. His dark brown uniform coat stretched across broad shoulders, and his steady blue eyes flicked instantly from Eric to Lena to Jack, assessing the scene with the practiced instinct of a man who had navigated many domestic disputes in small Montana towns. Beside him was Deputy Jenna Morales, early 30s, lean and athletic, with sharp cheekbones and steady, focused dark eyes. Her brown hair was pulled back into a tight braid that brushed the back of her jacket. Growing up in a troubled neighborhood in New Mexico had carved steel into her posture, her walk, the way she positioned her hand subtly near her holster, but not out of aggression, out of preparedness. Her gaze, quick and perceptive, caught the way Lena's daughters shrank behind their mother, the fading greenish bruises on Lena's wrist, the rigid stance Jack had taken to shield them. Sullivan stepped forward. "Evening, folks," he said calmly. "Got a report of a vehicle stopped in the storm last night. Came to make sure everyone here's safe." Eric scoffed loudly. "Safe? My wife kidnapped my kids and ran into a blizzard. I'm here to bring them home." The oldest girl whimpered. Even in the dim light, Jenna saw her flinch at the sound of Eric's voice. Scout growled, low and warning, head lowered protectively. "Step back, Eric," Jack said, voice even, but ironed with threat. "You're scaring them." Eric shoved his finger at Jack's chest. "They're mine. All of them." Jenna's tone cut in, cool and firm. "Sir, I'm going to need you to keep your distance, and we'll be speaking with Lena directly." Lena stepped forward, shoulders trembling but spine straight. Her copper-toned skin looked pale under the porch light, long black hair tangled from the storm. Her voice, though quiet, carried a strength sharpened by years of endurance. "The children aren't safe with you, Eric. You know that." Eric's eyes flashed, the kind of flash Jenna recognized from too many nights responding to domestic calls. A flash that meant danger. He stepped forward again, but Sullivan blocked him with a steady arm. "Not another step," the sheriff warned. Inside the cabin, the children clung to one another, wide-eyed. Jack glanced back once, seeing the fear etched in their faces, and something inside him hardened. No child should ever look at a parent that way. Sheriff Sullivan turned to Lena. "Ma'am, are you saying you left because you feared for your safety or your children's safety?" Lena hesitated. The shame of speaking the truth in front of strangers weighed on her. But Jenna stepped closer, her voice gentling. "It's okay," she said softly. "You're safe now." Something in Jenna's tone, steadfast, patient, gave Lena the courage she needed. "Yes," Lena said. "We weren't safe." The words hung in the frosty air. Sullivan nodded slowly, then turned to Eric. "Sir, I need to let you know we'll be opening an investigation into domestic abuse. You'll need to come with us and answer some questions in town." Eric's face contorted with disbelief and outrage. "This is ridiculous. She's twisting everything, all because I—" Jenna stepped in sharply. "Because you what, Eric?" she asked, her voice quieter than his, but sharper, forcing the truth toward daylight. Eric's jaw worked, but no answer came. What came instead was the tightening of his fists. Scout snapped to his feet. Jack stepped forward again. Sullivan angled himself to intervene. For one tense heartbeat, the entire ranch held its breath. Finally, Eric spat into the snow. "This isn't over." He threw a glare at Lena, one Jenna memorized instantly for her incident report, then climbed into his truck. The engine roared like a wounded animal as he sped away, tires kicking up frozen earth. The silence that followed was heavy, but no longer hopeless. Sullivan exhaled and tipped his hat. "Ms. Red Cloud, we'll get you before the county judge by noon tomorrow. We'll make sure you and the kids stay protected." Jenna approached Lena with a softness that contrasted the hardness she had shown Eric. "You did the right thing coming here," she said. "We'll help you now." But Jenna's eyes flicked briefly toward Jack, toward the blanket in the room, toward the storm still settling inside Lena's breaking heart. And she wondered just how many ghosts were sharing this cabin tonight. As Sullivan and Jenna returned to their SUV, they paused at the end of the drive, headlights illuminating Jack and Lena standing side by side, though neither quite knew what they were to each other yet. Just as Jenna opened her door, her radio crackled, an urgent dispatch from the sheriff's office. Jenna froze. Sullivan turned sharply. Lena tightened her hold on her baby. Scout growled again, sensing the shift in the air. And Jack stepped forward, every muscle coiled. The radio voice broke through the static with words that sent a chill straight through the night. "Be advised, Eric Red Cloud is headed back toward Cedar Ridge, and he's not alone." The storm outside had ended. The other storm had just begun. The days after the court ruling moved with a steadiness none of them had known in years. Winter still clung to the edges of the Montana plains, but at Jack Dalton's ranch, something warmer than fire was beginning to take root. Jack woke before dawn each morning, stepping into the crisp air with the habitual discipline of a former Navy SEAL. His tall, broad frame, sculpted by years of military conditioning, moved with a purposeful rhythm as he split logs behind the barn. Each swing of the axe carried the weight of regrets he'd held for 15 years. His rugged face, with its strong jawline and dark stubble, hardened in concentration, but softened whenever he glanced toward the cabin where the children were beginning to stir. Scout, the 4-year-old sable German shepherd, trotted beside him with quick, confident steps. Snow dusted the dog's thick coat, and his amber eyes followed Jack with unwavering loyalty. Every now and then he paused to sniff the wind, ears twitching, always alert, always ready. Inside the cabin, Lena Red Cloud moved with quiet purpose. Her tall, slender silhouette passed softly behind the frosted windows as she tidied the kitchen, braided her long black hair, and prepared breakfast for her children. Her copper-toned skin, once dulled by fear and exhaustion, now carried hints of warmth again as she settled into a life where danger no longer paced outside her door. She planted small pots of Montana wildflowers along the porch: blue flax, prairie coneflower, fireweed, her fingers lingering over the soil as if grounding herself in a land that might finally allow her to heal. In the evenings, she hung dream catchers woven by her late father and her mother, rose-red cloud, their willow frames wrapped in leather strips and threaded with feathers. And every dusk she lit a small braid of sage by the entryway. The fragrant smoke curled around her, carrying prayers and memory, lifting everything she could not yet say into the quiet Montana air. The children were the first to bloom. The oldest girl, with her solemn eyes and straight black hair, slowly shed her wary glances. She practiced reading the wind under Jack's guidance, watching how the breeze shifted the needles of the pine trees. The younger girls chased Scout across the yard, their laughter ringing between fence posts like chimes. Scout absorbed the attention with noble patience, allowing little hands to tug gently at his ears or bury themselves in his thick fur. Even the baby boy, bundled warmly, cooed when Scout lowered his head to nuzzle him. Jack found himself teaching the children the basics of ranch life. How to stack firewood carefully so it wouldn't topple. How to tell when a storm was approaching by reading the sky's shifting hues. How to stay close to the house when a strange vehicle approached the ranch. Lessons that came from a mixture of soldier instinct and an unexpected desire to keep these children safe. Deputy Jenna Morales began visiting more frequently. At first, she arrived under the guise of official check-ins, stepping out of her patrol SUV with her badge glinting beneath her winter coat. She was lean and strong, with her dark braid tucked neatly beneath her cap and sharp features made slightly softer by the steam rising from the cup of coffee Jack handed her. But over days, the visits took on a different tone. Jenna found herself staying a little longer each time, listening as Jack recounted the ghosts of old missions, or sitting with Lena at the kitchen table while the Lakota woman spoke gently about other women on the reservation who still lived in silence, still feared the men who filled their nights with harm. Jenna's eyes darkened each time she heard another story. Stories too similar to her own childhood memories in New Mexico, where shouting through thin apartment walls and bruises explained away as accidents had shaped her understanding of danger far too early. One evening, leaning against her SUV before leaving the ranch, Jenna said quietly, "I think we need something in Cedar Ridge. A women's circle. A safe place. Something I wish my mom had." Her voice steadied. "I'm going to build it." Jack watched her drive off into the dusk, admiration simmering beneath his usual stoic calm. Winter shifted slowly toward spring. The ranch became a canvas of new beginnings. Jack rebuilt the sagging porch rail. He patched the roof with new cedar tiles. He measured and cut beams for an additional room, a warm space meant for the girls, hammering each nail with a steady hand that slowly loosened the guilt wound tight in his chest. He worked long hours with a focus that bordered on devotion, knowing the room was more than lumber and insulation. It was an offering, a promise. Lena found her own ways to give meaning to the place. She taught her daughters old Lakota songs, their soft voices rising beneath the rafters each night. Sometimes she hummed while stirring a pot on the stove, her voice drifting like threads of smoke from the stovepipe. The children clung to those melodies, weaving them into their new routines as naturally as breath. Scout moved through this new life like a steadfast guardian. He circled the house perimeter every morning, nose to the wind, then returned to nudge Jack's leg with approval. He slept each night near the children's door, ears attuned to every sound. And Jack felt something shift inside him, something painfully close to hope. Yet with each day of growing peace came a reminder. He still carried a debt, no repair, no laughter, no sunrise could erase. The blanket folded inside his cedar chest, the indigo fabric, the broken lightning line woven by Lena's father, waited like a silent truth. Jack knew it was time. One bright afternoon, snowmelt dripping from the eaves, he walked to the porch where Lena was sweeping. She looked up, her dark eyes steady, no longer as guarded as in those first days. Jack held the blanket in his hands. Its weight felt heavier than any weapon he'd ever carried. "I need to speak with your mother," he said quietly, "and with the elders at Pine River. I need to tell them the truth." Lena's breath caught. "Jack, you don't have to." "Yes," he said gently but firmly. "I do." She studied him for a long moment. This tall, rugged man with storm-colored eyes, the man who had rescued her family, who carried ghosts like others carried memories, who never shied away from responsibility even when it broke him open. Slowly, she nodded. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the Montana hills, painting the land in amber light, Jack loaded the truck. The children climbed in, Scout leaping into the back seat with his usual eager grace. Lena settled beside Jack, the baby in her arms. Jack placed the folded blanket across his lap, fingertips brushing its worn edges. He started the engine. The road toward Pine River Reservation stretched before them, quiet, vast, and heavy with the past waiting to be faced. But just as they reached the bend, where the ranch disappeared from view, Scout bristled suddenly, ears snapping upright. Jack slowed instinctively. Another vehicle had pulled onto the road behind them. Dark. Slow, too slow. Lena turned, eyes narrowing. The truck crept closer. Jack's pulse tightened. Scout growled deep in his chest, and in that tense sliver of silence, Jack realized they were not heading toward the past alone. Someone else was following. The truck following them stayed in Jack Dalton's rearview mirror for the first several miles, its headlights crawling across the melting snow like a slow, deliberate shadow. Jack's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Scout sensed the tension instantly, his sable coat bristling, ears pricked, amber eyes fixed on the mirror. Beside Jack, Lena Red Cloud shifted, her copper-toned face drawn with worry, yet steadied by resolve. The children, bundled warm in the back seat, sensed the shift in atmosphere but remained quiet, trusting the adults to keep them safe. The truck behind them eventually stopped at a fork in the road, idling as though reconsidering its approach. When it finally turned away, disappearing behind a ridge of snow-dusted pines, Jack eased his breath. He didn't tell Lena he suspected it might have been someone tied to Eric, or perhaps Eric himself testing boundaries. The protective order was in place, but men like Eric didn't always respect borders on paper. Still, today was not a day for shadows. Today was the day he faced the truth. Pine River Reservation appeared beyond a stretch of rolling hills, its scattered homes and community buildings dusted with the last traces of winter. Smoke curled from chimneys. Children played in boots too big for them. Elders walked in pairs, wrapped in the thick woven blankets that defined Lakota winters. The lodge in the center, a tall wooden building decorated with painted tribal symbols and old photographs, seemed to pulse with quiet reverence. Lena guided Jack inside, carrying the baby in her arms. Her daughters followed closely, their small faces expectant yet nervous. This was their first return since leaving Eric behind. Inside the lodge, Rose Red Cloud waited. She stood tall despite the weight of 15 years, her frame sturdy and dignified beneath a burgundy wool shawl. Her hair, long, braided, streaked heavily with silver, hung over one shoulder. The lines on her copper-brown face were carved not by bitterness, but by endurance. Her dark eyes, deep and sorrowful, lifted when she saw Jack. They held storms, but also a kind of unwavering strength. For a moment, Jack couldn't speak. The room felt too sacred, the air too heavy with the truth he owed her. Rose stepped forward with slow, measured steps, her gaze never leaving his. Lena hovered beside her mother, her long black hair braided neatly, her presence both anchor and witness. Jack held out the indigo blanket with the broken lightning pattern, the blanket woven by Rose's husband, the father Lena lost. His voice, usually steady and clipped with military discipline, trembled now. 15 years ago, I should have come sooner, he said. I should have found you. I should have told you what happened. Rose reached out with hands weathered from decades of sewing, cooking, working, hands once held by the man who died to save a stranger. She touched the blanket's edge and closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. It wasn't an explosive grief, not the kind Jack had feared. It was quiet, long-awaited release. Tell me, she said softly. Jack explained, his truck sliding off the mountain road, the blizzard swallowing everything, his legs pinned by twisted metal. He described the man emerging from the storm, tall, long hair whipping in the wind, eyes fierce with determination and compassion. He told her how the man wrapped him in this very blanket, pulled him free, and how the ground beneath him gave way. Rose listened without interrupting, her face trembling only once, when Jack's voice cracked, describing how helpless he'd been to stop the fall. When he finished, he fell to his knees, bowing his head. I've carried this for 15 years, he whispered, and it's not enough. But I will spend the rest of my life honoring what he gave me. Rose knelt with surprising strength, resting her palm over Jack's heart. My husband died a warrior's death, she murmured, saving another life. You were not meant to carry this alone. Her voice steadied. But now you must carry something else. My daughter and her children. If that is your promise, then it will be enough. Jack nodded, a sting in his eyes he didn't hide. Lena looked at him, something in her expression shifting into certainty. Word spread quickly across the reservation, and by sunset, the lodge glowed with preparations. A small wedding ceremony, Lakota in tradition, but touched with Montana simplicity, blossomed within the wooden walls. Elders with long silver hair and weathered faces arranged chairs in a circle. Children carried woven decorations and small bunches of sage. Women wore brightly colored skirts and shawls embroidered with heritage patterns. Sheriff Hank Sullivan arrived dressed in his best uniform, his broad chest stretched proudly beneath polished buttons. His face, lined, sun-worn, broke into a rare smile when he saw Lena free of fear. Beside him walked Deputy Jenna Morales, clad in a navy jacket, her dark braid resting over her shoulder, her eyes bright and reflective. In her hands, she carried a folder, the foundational paperwork for a new support program, Pine River Shelter Circle, something born from Lena's story and from Jenna's own painful past. Judge Margaret Cole did not attend in person, but her letter, written in careful cursive, praised Lena's courage and wished blessings upon the family. When the ceremony began, Jack stood at the center, wearing a freshly pressed flannel shirt and jeans without a single tear. Simple, but his strong frame filled them with quiet dignity. His steel-gray eyes softened when Lena approached. She wore a deep blue dress that complemented her warm copper skin, and her black braid was adorned with a single white bead passed down from her grandmother. Her daughters clung to her skirt for a moment before being gently guided to their places. Jack knelt briefly, speaking to them. "I won't replace your father," he said softly, "but I will stand between you and every storm. That's my vow." The oldest girl nodded solemnly. The younger ones pressed into him with trust blooming anew. When the ceremony reached its heart, Lena extended her hand, and Jack slipped onto her finger a band of silver he had carved himself. Along its edge was engraved a small lightning line, symbolizing not the brokenness of the past, but the path that had brought them back to light. Then the elders stepped forward with the star quilt. Its radiant colors, sunset orange, sky blue, forest green, merged into a single burst of warmth. They draped it over Jack and Lena's shoulders, binding them beneath its weight. The quilt symbolized unity, protection, ancestors watching and welcoming. Scout sprinted joyfully in circles around them, a strip of bright cloth tied playfully to his collar, his tail wagging like a banner of approval. The children laughed, chasing him between the chairs. That night, beneath lantern glow, the lodge echoed with soft chants, blessings, and quiet tears of joy. When they returned to the ranch the next morning, the land felt somehow different. The first hints of spring stretched green across the plains, shy but persistent. Jack and Lena stood on the porch, hand in hand, the star quilt folded between them. Scout bounded across the yard, the children following in shrieks of delight. Jenna's SUV rumbled down the road, headed back toward town, carrying with her a future that promised hope for many other families. Jack glanced at Lena. "This ranch used to feel empty," he murmured, "like winter would never end." Lena leaned her head against his shoulder. "And now?" He squeezed her hand gently, watching their children and their dog race beneath the bright Montana sky. "Now," he said, "winter doesn't feel so cold anymore."